Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jerry Blass, CEO of Compliance Assistant and co-chair of the New Jersey HIM Security, Privacy, and Compliance Committee. Today's panel discussion you can see on the screen, improving security through information sharing and use of threat intelligence. This is actually an encore. Hello? Okay. This is actually an encore of a panel session that was held at the September 2018 NJDV HIMSS event in Atlantic City. It is being recorded today so that it can be added to our page on njhims.org for ongoing sharing. All attendees are muted, but you can ask questions by typing them into the question panel. And at the end, we'll go through those. You can also electronically raise your hand at the end, and we'll unmute you. So we'll address all the questions at the end of the panel discussion. So we have a lot to cover today. I want to introduce our moderator, is Ronnie Daldos, who is the lead security engineer at Mitre. We have panelists, John Gomez, CEO of Sensato. We have Mike Maximo, who is the vice president and CEO of BB Healthcare. Michael Garrity, New Jersey CISO and first director of the New Jersey Cybersecurity and Communications Integration Cell. And we should have Mike Tirico joining us. He is of Information Security at Newbridge. So, Ronnie, it is all yours.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction, Jerry. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks. So again, thanks to everyone for joining us for an informative discussion on threat intelligence and information sharing. So to kick us off, I'm going to ask Mike Garrity if you could help us with some level setting. So we hear the terms threat intelligence, threat-informed defense, information sharing when we talk about issues related to cybersecurity and healthcare. So I was wondering if you could maybe help explain the difference and how they differ.
Okay, so hi everybody, and thanks for joining. My name's Mike Garrity. So threat intelligence is a term that's thrown around there a lot, and it means different things to a lot of different people. But to us in the NJ-KIC, we kind of follow the Gartner definition in that it's evidence-based knowledge, including the context and the mechanisms and indicators, implications, and actionable advice that people can use to protect themselves from these types of threats. So when I say evidence-based, and the context that is with it is really important. In a lot of places, we see people sharing out threat indicators, and they consider it threat intelligence when it's just an IP address or a domain, but there's no context to it. And so, being able to use that in any form or fashion that's usable or actionable is really difficult to do because you just can't be blocking IP addresses without any context behind that. As far as threat-informed defense, I guess that's a term that's often applied to the Mitre Attack framework. Here in the NJ-KIC, we also use the term intelligence-driven cybersecurity, and so it's all the information that the threat intelligence provides you, whether it be on threat actors, their tactics and protocols and stuff like that, so that you can do your defense in accordance with that type of intelligence. It's informed instead of just ad hoc whack-a-mole. And then the third term that you threw out there was information sharing, and that is the heart and soul of what we do in the NJ-KIC. And we were created in 2015 by an executive order from then Governor Christie to be the state's one-stop shop for information sharing, threat intelligence, best practices, and the like. And so understanding that cybersecurity in the state of New Jersey is important not only to the citizens, but also the public and private institutions. Is really where we come from and why we exist. And so our job is to share that threat intelligence with you, but also to share threat-informed defense mechanisms that you can use to protect yourself or your organization.
Thanks. Oh, thanks, Michael. And I think you definitely, hit the nail on the head about context, right? So that's really important when we're looking at some of these sources of threat intelligence. So as the CISO and director of NJKIC, so you talked a little bit about the role and mission. How about your role specific to healthcare and what you do in helping, looking at issues that would impact the healthcare environment?
So I'll take it in two different phases here. So cybersecurity threats, we look at them holistically. A threat, whether it be malware or denial of service or threat actors, they're going to be common to every critical infrastructure sector, whether it's healthcare or banking, finance, and the rest of them, energy and the like. But specific to healthcare, what we do in the NJKIC is we have a cyber threat intelligence analysis team. And we break those up into the different critical infrastructure sectors. So each one of our analysts are assigned, a sector or a number of sectors that they focus on, because the impacts of those threats as executed against those, critical infrastructure sectors like healthcare are going to be specific to those sectors. And so we're looking at things, why is the healthcare industry targeted? Who are the threat actors? What are things that can impact them? What are the vulnerabilities within the healthcare sector? And so, what we really try and do is focus on that one sector, with that analyst, so that we can provide targeted threat intelligence as well as, that informed defense that we mentioned above.
Great. Now, I don't know if most of the folks on the phone are aware, the NJKIC, you provide some really valuable threat information that's completely free. Can you talk a little bit more about, NJKIC advisories, your alerts, and the weekly bulletins that you put out?
Sure. So, part of that threat intelligence comes through those advisories. I mentioned we're the one-stop shop. That doesn't mean we have all the answers. In fact, we rely on all sorts of our partners, including, those in the healthcare sector. Cybersecurity is a team sport. We got to build that ecosystem and rely on one another. But one of the things that we do is we take all the information that we're getting, those attacks against, the state of New Jersey networks, those attacks and incidents that are reported to us, and we try and share that information out through those advisories, through the bulletin. So today is Thursday. In about an hour or so, we'll send out our weekly bulletin. I just completed my section of it. It's a new section called This is Security. Today's section deals with supply chain security risk and some of the best practices that can be used, to help, prevent or mitigate the risks that are there. So advisories, alerts, we receive a lot of those not only from those generated from our systems, but organizations like the FBI and DHS use us as the conduit to communicate with the membership of the NJKIC. So ISAC is another organization that uses us as that conduit. So we're a clearinghouse for the state of New Jersey. But our membership goes far beyond just the state of New Jersey. We're in, 48 different states and 27 different countries now, going as far. And I was on the phone yesterday speaking with the health ministry, the Ministry of Health over in Japan, on what we do and how we set this up here.
Wow, that's great. It's really impressive. So for anybody who's not aware of the NJKIC bulletin, if you go out to the website and just provide your email address, and you'll get on the list and start receiving this information on a weekly basis. And as you mentioned, it is completely free, so it's definitely a great resource. So
yeah.
thank you again.
One thing I want to add, especially since we got the healthcare sector on the phone, is it's not just your email address. What we do is we ask you to provide us what sector or sectors you're interested in receiving information about. We don't want to just spam people with things that are not relevant to their organization or to their area of interest. So if you tell us you're in the healthcare sector, you're only going to get alerts, advisories that are specific to those, to that sector.
Oh, awesome. That's great to hear. Great. Thank you so much. So, right, so our next question is for Michael Maximo. So, Michael, as the VP and CIO at Beebe Healthcare in Delaware, I know that you are a advocate and leader for information sharing and have facilitated collaboration among all the different hospitals in Delaware. So I was wondering, can you share a little bit about how all that came together?
Absolutely. As Mr. Garrity mentioned, cybersecurity is a team sport. Each and every one of us by herself really doesn't stand much of a chance against the threat actors that are out there today. However, when we work together, we share information. We're not as potentially easy of a target, and we do stand a better chance. In healthcare, like many others, although my neighboring hospitals are our competitors, we share patients. So our friends, our families, our neighbors and community visit many of our different health services. So here in Delaware, we have at least some of our local hospitals. We are open sharing and collaborating with each other. So some of this has already taken place. So that kind of sets the foundation of what's to come with cybersecurity. So we share information and collaborate in ways that benefits our improving our community's care. So I like to say that, when I'm working with our competitors, our neighbors, that, we lay our swords at the door. We come to the table to help each other fight our common enemy. And when we leave, we pick our swords up and continue our battles. So again, that foundation kind of already existed amongst a few of us. But then in October 2015, by the way of Executive Order 55, we had created the Delaware Cybersecurity Advisory Council, one of our governor's advisories, which was established representing all critical infrastructure sectors in the state, such as finance, government, utilities, et cetera, and of course, healthcare. So I was nominated and then appointed by the governor to represent Delaware's healthcare industry, at this table. As a result, I felt that I needed some mechanism to share and communicate what I'm learning from the other sectors to my colleagues, and just as important, kind of create a forum to be able to discuss healthcare industry pertinent issues that I could take back to the advisory council from our industry perspective. So that's kind of the genesis of how this happened, how we were able to pull together. And obviously Delaware is a small state, so it was not that difficult, but even starting with a regional and work your way throughout the state, is potentially an approach. We've been meeting since that time in 2015, late 15, early 16. We meet every 2 weeks, typically via conference calls, and these have continued. There are weeks when we have full agendas that people want. There are things that are pressing and people are concerned about, and then there are weeks that we really don't have an agenda, much of an agenda at all. So it's more of an open call, where people can express some top of mind things, and we discuss them. And usually those turn out to end up being a very worthwhile and robust conversation. And then, of course, occasionally we'll meet up at a regional or a national conference like HIMSS or High Trust, et cetera. And then we've also worked together in person with an incident response tabletop exercise. And there was very much live sharing of information that we all learned, different concepts we all learned, et cetera, and then shared that with each other. So we've all together improved our security incident response plans. Recently, we've even opened up our alliance to include a few of the bordering hospitals in Maryland. Again, Delaware is a small state, and we share patients across our state borders. So as you know, cyber criminals know no boundaries.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Oh, that's great. Can you also share, what kind of lessons have you learned, or in what kind of, reception have you gotten from your participants?
Sure. Actually, very surprisingly, trust came much easier than expected. Initially, I thought it would take a little while, especially for those who don't work with each other, from the northern part of the state. Our neighbors down here in the southern Delaware part. We meet each other, we talk to each other, we've done some other things together, but to have everybody in this alliance talking to each other and being able to share information. I was a little worried about how long it would take for those bonds to form and that trust to come. But what we learned was it really just took one organization that really just kind of jumped in with potentially vulnerable information to share, and that kind of seemed to set that trust. Now, we've also learned a few other things, that it really doesn't matter how big or small you are. No one organization has all the answers, and frankly, if you're a big organization, listen to some of the smaller organizations, as we tend to be a bit more resourceful, do more with less, etc. And if, you know, for a smaller organization, listen to some of the larger organizations and take away some things about how they've structured their department, etc., their standards, and of course any lessons that they learned. Many times, you know, we suggest, before trying to reinvent the wheel, run the topics through the alliance. Most likely somebody's already done that research on a product or solution, or they've already encountered some resistance to rolling out a new policy or a process. So we can learn from each other on what challenges to expect, and you know, when we're implementing a solution or policy, and really how they overcame it. You know, may or may not work for our respective organizations, but it's a heck of a lot better than starting from scratch.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a great insight. Thank you so much.
Ronnie?
Yeah.
Hi, this is Mike Tirico. So I didn't know if I apologize. I've been on for pretty much the duration of this talk, and I just wanted to interject a little bit because I know we spoke about this topic at our fall event, and I wanted to just chime in and talk about how invaluable not only the membership to HIMSS, and I'm certainly this is, I guess, a plug for the New Jersey chapter, but how invaluable the information sharing has been through the New Jersey chapter of HIMSS. It's really opened up quite a few doors for me in terms of being able to share information and gather information with other organizations here in the New Jersey landscape. I'm, as people probably may or may not know, I did miss the introduction, but I'm the information security officer at Newbridge Medical Center up in North Jersey, and it's been fantastic to be able to share information and gather information from some of the other hospitals in New Jersey. Oftentimes, these are things that I do see, through NJKIC, but sometimes they aren't, and it's been great to be able to kick over some information to not only Sensato and John, because I have a relationship with John Gomez, but also St. Peter's. Hunterdon, I see, is on the line here as well, and I've had some information sharing sessions with them. Very informal, this is very grassroots type stuff, but we're always looking to add folks to the mix here, and people are certainly more than welcome to reach out to me after this, to join the list.
Great. Actually, your timing was perfect, because I was just going to ask you if you could share any lessons that you may have learned, because I know that you're involved as well in information sharing with with your role at Newbridge.
Yeah,
so,
I mean,
I
was going to say, one of the, I think probably for most people, as Mike was saying, laying your sword at the door, so to speak, it's a good visual there, but it's true, and it's there's a vulnerability in sharing, right? In kind of sharing what's happening behind closed doors at your organization. Things as specific as some of these some of these spoof emails that we're getting, that look like they're coming from our CEO. We've seen quite a bit of that going to payroll, right, to our payroll department, things of that nature. And so there is that vulnerability, and being able to get beyond that vulnerability, I think is probably the most valuable the most valuable thing that I would try to stress to people. it really does help everyone to be able to share the information.
Great, thank you. So I don't know if many people know it. In addition to your security role at Newbridge, you also are an attorney. So I was wondering if we can get you to put your attorney cap on, or your lawyer hat on.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I certainly. Yeah. No, I certainly don't want to come across as giving any type of legal advice on this. I would obviously encourage everyone to talk to their compliance department and or general counsel, about the comfort level, right, for the organization to be able to share information, with something like this. But the Information Sharing Act, I think, is pretty clear, and people should open up their browser and Google, right, the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act to get a little bit more better versed on what type of information can be shared. I hope that helps.
Yeah, Joel, can you give us an example of the types of maybe legal exposures of information sharing?
Well, I would probably yield to Mike Garrity on this. I don't know if Mike is able to chime in on this, or John Gomez, considering John has the ISAO now that he's been standing up.
So this is Mike Garrity. So yeah, thanks, Mike C. I'm not a lawyer either, but we freely share information here. So we don't have the constraints necessarily that a healthcare organization would. And there are obviously regulatory issues, there are insurance issues, there are other things to be considered, privacy issues as well. But anonymizing the information, being able to provide it. We have a program here called New Jersey CTIC, Cyber Threat Intelligence Exchange. Individuals or organizations that sign up for this, they sign an agreement that that goes along with the CISA, basically the same thing that the federal government does as far as sharing information and the protections that we provide. It's considered confidential, it's considered protected, and is not disclosed to anybody. And if we share the information, at least the tactics or the context within it, not specifically those that report it to us, we do anonymize it so that we can provide that information, share it out with the bigger audience, because those same threats that are targeting you are targeting everybody else.
Okay, great info. Thanks so much, Michael. So our next question is for John Gomez, who's the founder and CEO of Sensato. So, John, back in Mike Tirico talked a little bit about this. So back in October, the FDA announced that there was a signed MOU, memorandum of understanding, with Sensato, Sensato's information sharing an analysis organization, or an ISAO, and the ISAC. First, can you explain the difference between a information sharing analysis center and information sharing and analysis organization? And maybe help us understand, more about the Sensato ISAO and the significance of that MOU.
Sure. And actually, it took me some time to figure out the differences, and I had to go kind of research this through DHS. But there is actually a difference, and the easiest way to understand it is that basically ISACs are vertical organizations, really focused and assigned within one of the critical infrastructure sectors of DHS, which there are 16, healthcare being one of them, transportation and energy, and some others that probably everybody knows. But they really are focused on a vertical kind of focus. So they're thinking of the impact of cyber risk and cybersecurity to that vertical. Where the ISAOs can be vertical, but I think they were envisioned to be a little bit more horizontal. So specific to us as an ISAO, we are much more horizontal, right? So we are not just looking at healthcare, although that's our primary focus, and probably about 90% of our effort time spent in healthcare. And then we are looking at other sectors and trying to aggregate data from other areas. Mike Tirico spoke about, the information sharing kind of things that we talk about, and seeing if there's ways to get, early indicators of threats. But we're also looking for early, TTP, and trying to figure out what are other industry sectors facing. So as an ISAO, for example, we were just having conversations in autonomous vehicle security. And one of the challenges that we're seeing now on autonomous vehicles is this concept of adversarial images, which I won't get too big into, but adversarial images, when we look at those and how they're being used to compromise autonomous vehicle security, we start thinking about their application in healthcare, and is there a threat in healthcare to deploy adversarial imaging? So really our focus is kind of not just looking at things healthcare specific, but what else is impacting or could impact healthcare, and how could that be used? And I think given our background in healthcare, we're able to translate that intelligence probably a little bit, better than say somebody else doing it. The reason we spend about 90% of our time in healthcare right now is because of the MOU that you referenced, which is really FDA and Mitre and others have been really trying to think about how do you evolve medical device cybersecurity readiness. So we've been, really thinking and focusing on, how do we kind of help deal with that evolution? How do we help support that evolution and make things much more secure from a medical device security risk? And some of that is on our commercial side of our business, but a lot of it is really driven by kind of the ISAO side, which we're also trying to evolve the ISAO structure, and it's taken probably longer than we expected. But hopefully that helps. I didn't confuse you more, but I think the easiest way is, ISACs are vertical, and ISAOs are kind of typically horizontal.
Oh, thank you. So how can other HDOs get involved with, with what your organization is, with the Sensato ISAO?
It's pretty straightforward. I mean, you can email me directly or info@sensato.co. You can also go to mdctf.org. That's mdctf.org. You can join there. That's the Medical Device Cybersecurity Task Force. If you join that, you get grandfathered into the ISAO as that rolls out. Kind of the challenge we're having right now in the ISAO is really trying to work out the technical infrastructure required to make the ISAO really effective. And that technical infrastructure requires the unification of medical device manufacturers, healthcare providers, other industry experts, and kind of creating that infrastructure that allows information sharing. And we've looked at some of the things out there like Taxi and Sticks and some other things, and they don't have the fluidity. So we're really trying to create something that is much more like iTunes, believe it or not, than what we see in the marketplace today. And that would be part of the ISAO and freely available to people. So if you get involved now, you'll get grandfathered in, and hopefully as that comes online, you'll have access to that and be able to participate and share and those kind of things.
Yeah, interestingly, one of the enumerated protections right under the CISA Act, the liability protections, does apply to sharing information with ISAOs, as I mentioned earlier, and some of the information that I passed along to John.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So, so now I have some additional questions that I'm going to just kind of open up to the group. So please, feel free to jump in and add your insights. So, in your discussions with the C-suite, are you finding that they are seeing value in the sharing and support your collaboration efforts, or do they still look at information sharing as a potential liability to the HDO?
So Ronnie, this is Mike Maximo. I'll take a stab at this one. I know for a fact there are definitely CIOs that participate in our group. And I failed to mention before, not only do we have the hospitals within Delaware and Maryland, but we also have our Medical Society of Delaware, which represents the physician practices. We have our HIE that participates in the call. We have the Delaware Healthcare Association that gets involved. We work with some of the legislators in some of the things that come out. So with that said, I know a lot of CIOs do participate in this as well, and many of us sit at in the C-suite with our CEOs and others. And from time to time, things do come up, and I am asked, are we sharing this information with some of our other colleagues? And again, we are. They actively participate. I've also had CEOs from other organizations mention to me in conversation, thank you for pulling this together and sharing it with our teams. And I think you're starting to see, even amongst competitors, with some of the reimbursement models changing in healthcare, you are going to start seeing more alignment and collaboration, throughout many areas of our businesses. But cybersecurity is fundamental, and it makes a lot of sense. So I do believe there is, they see the value and they do support our collaborative efforts.
Great, thank you so much. Anybody else want to chime in on the question? Okay, I'll move on. Have any of you received pushback on the type of information that you share and how you share, how you share it? Have there been any types of barriers that you've encountered as part of your sharing?
I think, just to throw this out there, I don't know if we haven't encountered issues with sharing, probably because we're on the opposite side and don't have the challenges and concerns that the healthcare organizations have when it comes to things like the general counsel. I think one of the challenges is general counsels often believe that, well, if you're sharing information, that means you're disclosing things about our organization, which kind of brings up what Mike Maximo was talking about, where, yes, you're competing, but you got to kind of get past that. We have seen that, right, where we have tried to bring people together, create forum groups. I think when you think of what Mike Maximo and Delaware are doing, it's kind of crazy cool because we've tried to do that in other states. And by we, I mean as an industry. And it's just very hard because you have to get past that whole challenge around, like, well, what are you going to tell them? And, are they going to understand our weaknesses? And are you going to inadvertently disclose that we've been breached? And I think that's some of the challenges. And I'm sure Mike and Mike, maybe all three Mikes, can talk to that better than I, because they're probably living with it. But that's what we've seen from an issue of disclosure and challenge with disclosure.
Yeah, this is Mike Maximo. I mean, there are times we do, work with counsel or our compliance officer just to keep them in a loop. And, if there is an incident, how much of that do we want to disclose? We typically keep things more on a very technical level, keep things on a very, policy level, talking about policies and procedures. And just some of our experiences when we go to implement. I think when you really start getting much deeper into that conversation, about types of breaches or some types of disclosures, you do start to get real close to that line where you probably want to have conversations with counsel or your privacy officer before you go too deep.
Great. Thank you. Unless anyone has anyone else want to contribute, or so we'll go ahead and move on to the next question. So originally we kicked off, we were talking about threat intelligence and threat information, and some sources are obviously better than others. So does anyone on the panel have any favorite sources for threat intelligence that you would share, and why you like them?
I hope everybody's going to say the NJ kicks threat intelligence. But so I'm going to take this. This is Mike Garrity. I think the best source of intelligence is the internal threat intelligence that you develop. So the attacks against your individual systems, your perimeter, and the like. That has been, that's unvarnished, unwashed attacks that you can really use and identify. So, for instance, yesterday we were looking at a web application firewall, and we saw, 85,000 attempts to access WordPress admin login, forms and stuff like that. Now, we don't use WordPress here, and while that's not a threat to us, the fact that people are indiscriminately going against IP addresses that the state has looking for this tells me that they're also trying to do the same thing elsewhere. So we can take that information, we can package it up, we can send it out to others. It's not going to be a threat that necessarily shows up as far as an alert going out, but just understanding what types of pages there are. So when you think of it, your admin form or your login form for the admin on WordPress, that's part and parcel of WordPress and may not be considered as an exploit because that's how the admins log in. So those are some of the things where I talked about context before. It's not just the alerts that you see on your SIM. It's also some of the other analysis that you can do to find things that don't look right.
Hey, Ronnie, this is John. And so actually, before Mike said anything about NJCCIC, I was going to say that's probably one of our favorite sources, and for a variety of reasons. And they do a lot more than just threat intel. I mean, they have decryption keys and a library of decryption keys, and there's a whole bunch of other things. It'd probably be interesting to just do a presentation on just what they do and demo some of the stuff they do at some point if Mike were up to that, and not to put him on the spot. I will say I think one of the challenges when we talk about favorite sources for threat intelligence is that it goes back to something actually Mike Garrity talked about earlier in his opening remarks, which is how we define threat intelligence. And I think most people want like the super cool inside track threat intelligence, and that's really hard to kind of put out there, right? Because you need security classifications and there's a whole bunch of background infrastructure that goes with that. So we kind of have in the current state of cybersecurity, not just in healthcare, and this is the part Mike I think alluded to, was we think a threat intelligence is a list of IP addresses that we block, and we somehow believe, well, that's our threat intelligence. And it's interesting to me because there's a whole cottage industry that's basically selling lists of IP addresses. And when we've looked at some of the commercial offerings or even some of the non-commercial open source offerings, I think threat intelligence in the context of what Mike Tirico and Mike Maximo need, and a lot of others on this phone need to do their jobs and think about strategic planning and what they're going to do over the next year. That's really hard to find. I don't know if there's a favorite source that does that other than like a NJCCIC. And even if you look at DHS or CERT or any of the HHS or FDA or any of that stuff, it really does I don't think it lives up to that. Having a list of 1,000 IP addresses does not give you the opportunity to develop cybersecurity strategy, right? And I think we need to get better at differentiating information from true intelligence. So maybe I'm a little bitter about it, but I just kind of keep thinking, it's not what we want, right? It's not what we have for the most part in the industry.
No, and if I could add to that, John, one of the challenges from operations for being an HDO, a provider, is it's almost like getting hit in the face with a shotgun blast of information. And it's, so it's really, there are so many sources out there that we are being bombarded, and much of it's either the same or similar information. So it really is trying to kind of weed through all the sources of threat intelligence and trying to find the one that fits your organization the best, and then focus on that one and keep your finger on the pulse of that. Otherwise, you drive yourself nuts, and you're just doing busy work. And as you said, I can't tell you how many I get every day that shows the IP list of IOCs, but something more meaningful. So we rely on a couple different sources. One is our security partner who manages our and monitors our HIDs and our NIDs, our SIM, and they do a very nice job when there's a particular threat that's out there growing. They provide, I think, the necessary information that my team needs to take to defend against that or prepare against that. I do look at the ISAC a little bit, some of the threads, and then frankly, just our internal cyber alliance things that when somebody is seeing, for example, some activity either internal or knocking at the door or some TTP that they're seeing, and they can share that information with the alliance group. Hey, we're seeing this. Just heads up, and that goes a long way too.
Great, thank you. Yeah, thanks everybody for your response on that. And John, Gomez, to your point on taking a session just on DJ Kick and what they do, we agree with you. And back in November, we actually did that. So for folks that are interested after the call, if you go out to the New Jersey HIMSS website, there's we have all of our past webinars are recorded, and one of them is with our own Mike Garrity and talking about the NJ Kick and the office services and their mission and what they do. So we encourage everybody to go out, and check out some of that content out there, because a lot of great information. So thanks for setting me up on that, John. Next question. So I'm sure most people are familiar, or maybe not everyone's familiar with Mitre's attack model or attack framework. Stands for Adversary Tactics, Techniques, and Common Knowledge. I was wondering if you could provide some insight in how an HDO might be able to use attack to help improve their security posture.
Is that open to you, or sorry?
I'm sorry?
Yeah, I didn't know if you were directing that to somebody or anybody.
No, that's an open question, but I guess Don, you're probably the best position to answer it, though.
Can you repeat it again, please? I heard about the posture.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, so in using Mitre's attack, right? So if you can provide any insight on how an HDO might use a curated knowledge base like attack to help improve their security posture.
Yes, I want to talk a little bit about what attack is. I'm not sure if everybody knows. So you can go to, I think it's attack.mitre.org. I could be wrong on the URL, but it is a free framework. Is it? Yeah. So that Mitre has built out and grown wildly in popularity on several different fronts. So it's not NIST and it's not HIPAA. It really, what they've done is for each of the major operating systems, Mac, Linux, Windows, I think they're working on mobile devices. I'm not sure if that's been released or not yet. They've looked at all the different ways that an attacker could compromise a system. And it's actually a fascinating body of work just in and of itself. But I think the interesting part, and one way to use it, and there are a variety of ways, and there's tools being built around it, and a bunch of programs and assessment programs using it. But one way, just to give a quick example, is threat hunting. And threat hunting is kind of evolving as part of a best practice in most organizations. But using the Mitre attack framework from a threat hunting perspective, looking at your infrastructure, saying, okay, we have this type of operating system, we have these kind of assets within that, and here are let's go out and take 3 or 4 of the attack framework methodologies, if you will, attacker methodologies, and see if those could be used in our organization, or has somebody actually done that already and has gotten into our organization. So that's one way. Another way is for incident response and investigation, where if you do have an incident and you're trying to determine the scope of the incident, you can attack quite easily to say, okay, well, this is what the indicators look compromise, show us these are the type of tactics and techniques the attackers probably would exploit in this situation or execute in this situation. So what does that translate to in terms of how we may be compromised? So if you haven't played around with the attack framework, it is worth getting to know. It is big, and at first it probably is going to be overwhelming, but there's a variety of different ways to use it. So those are just some quick examples.
Great, thank you so much, John. Again, so here's another question that's open up to the whole group. What advice would you give smaller HDOs who may not have a dedicated security analyst?
Ronnie, this is Mike Maxima. I'll try to answer that just from my own experience. Unfortunately, many of us in small organizations have that last bullet in our job description that says, and all other duties as assigned. And in many small organizations, and anyone listening from a small organization probably says, that is my job description. So that security kind of falls under many people with roles that just don't have the full-time dedication to security. So there are many small organizations that it's a part-time job in everything else they're trying to do. So what I feel, this is my opinion, what does help and what does work if you can't get dedicated resources due to funding or whatever. One is to really join or form an alliance so that your numbers, you can work with others that have more experience or that again, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Lessons learned, strategies, policies. Why should you create policies if someone else has already done it that has very sound policies? Of course, you need to vet them out, make sure that they work for your organization, but at least it's a framework. There are other organizations out there that do have frameworks for you to, templates for you to model after. Secondly, if you can't do it yourself, I would find if you have some operating budget where you can at least start somewhere with a third-party partner to implement, manage, monitor your endpoint protection, your HIDs, NIDs, or other security components. They have the subject matter expertise and the latest TTPs. A part-time security resource, if you have 50 other things you're working on, you're just not even going to have anything close to that type of knowledge and experience in Intel. And it's a hell of a lot cheaper than the cost of a single breach. So that might be a great opportunity for somebody in a smaller organization. And if all else fails and can't get a dedicated resource, again, it has to be, maybe take that team approach. Create a committee that comprise of your network or your desktop team and kind of study this thing together and create a shared responsibility. Security is all of our responsibility. It's not just one person's responsibility. So, but at the end of the day, nothing beats having somebody just focused on protecting your organization, working with others. And if you can't do it, find some third-party help. And create a team.
Yeah, we just point out, so many organizations are in this situation, right? And I'm just kind of, as Mike is talking, I'm thinking about some of the tools that we've deployed and that we're really, that we rely on, things that are seamless, right? Next generation firewalls that are somewhat seamless, like Palo Wildfire, that's takes a dynamic and a static type of an analysis approach, and is seamless. There's machine learning involved there, so that really does take some of the heavy burden off of us in a way. Same thing with with some things as simple as advanced threat protection through Office 365, right? You have some of these tools now that really do help in automating some of these detection and monitoring type of functions. So that's been helpful for us. Kind of going back to some of the intelligence gathering, through OTX too, something that we rely on pretty heavily.
I mentioned also that outsourcing some of this to, operationalizing it, it's a lot cheaper than the cost of a single breach. I think that's the other thing is I think hopefully now our boards and our C-suites are, reading enough in the news and seeing the cost, the true cost of breaches. I remember early on when Hollywood Presby got hit and somebody, I heard a conversation, so they said, yeah, but the ransom was like $17,000. Well, yeah, the ransom was, but that, the mitigation, the forensics, the legal, I've seen numbers as high as about $3.5 million. That's what that breach cost. The ransom was $17,000. So when you do read some of these breaches and see some staggering numbers, they're 7-digit breaches, and even small organizations, physician practices, are between 6 and 7-digit numbers as far as fines and cost. So hopefully small organizations can have these discussions and pull some of this data together for some of those decision makers to help them get some type of funding.
Just to add on to what Mike said, in New Jersey, there's a group that Hunterdon started. Mike Tirico, I know, is part of it. I believe it's Hunterdon, Atlanticare, Newbridge, St. Peters. I forgot who else is involved. But they've tried to start this grassroots group here. I think they meet quarterly. Not sure when the next quarterly meeting is. But that's a real, to Mike Maximo's point of kind of trying to seek out others to partner with. That is kind of I think the charter, not to speak for them, and Mike Tirico can correct me on this. But that's part of it, is to kind of create this grassroots group that smaller hospitals or mid-sized hospitals can kind of turn to and collaborate. And most importantly is, if there ever is a breach, that there is this group of people you can turn to and say, we need help. And just like Mike discussed the cost of the breach, one of the big challenges we see is the requirement for personnel in a real breach, right? Because you're trying to figure out what's going on with the breach. And that's kind of an all hands deck thing, but you still have to manage your users. You still have to unlock accounts. You still have to, apply patches. And that's where one of these kind of groups, whether what's happening in Delaware, here in New Jersey with what Hunterdon started, you could turn to these guys and say, hey, do you have anybody with Exchange background? Do you have somebody who understands Active Directory? We just need some help while we're focusing on the breach recovery. Even though you guys had a presentation by NJCCIC, reaching out to Hunterdon and asking them to maybe do a presentation on a future HIMSS on what this group is and how it works might be a great option as well.
Yeah, John, case in point, one of the Delaware organizations got hit with Petya, or not Petya, one of those. And unbeknownst to all of us, we all reached out to the CIO up there to see, how can we help you? Do you need bodies? Do you need anything we can do to help from a technology standpoint? And there had to be multiple hospitals did the same thing, because that's the kind of relationships that you start to form when you create these alliances. And although they did have the backing of corporate, they were able to pull people together. But not everybody has that luxury of a corporate office that can allocate staff to come down, especially it knows what your environment's all about. So, that is one of the benefits of an alliance, is just that camaraderie, that collaboration, that desire to help each other. And we were all willing to commit resources to help them out.
Oh, wow, that's a lot of great info. We're coming up on the hour. So before I ask if anyone has any last words, what I'd like to do is open up the if folks want to start queuing up some questions. So while and then just kind of type them into the question box. And so while folks are doing that, what I'd like to do is just ask our panel if there's any last words or advice that we maybe haven't covered yet that you'd like to share, and then we'll let folks start typing in some questions.
So Ronnie, Mike Garrity again, and I know we've said this, but the NJ Kick is a service provided for you, okay? Healthcare organizations, the public, other organizations as well. Our job is to serve you. So if there's anything that we can do, to help you in your efforts to make your organizations more secure, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Ronnie, this is Mike Maximo. I would just say, just do it. Lay your swords at the door, reach across the street to your neighbor, shake their hand, form a collaboration for the collective benefit of your community. This is not something to compete over. This is about keeping your patients safe.
Yeah, and I would just add, you know, I don't see on our slide here our email, but I could certainly gladly connect with anybody who's interested in continuing conversations about, you know, things that we're doing and comparing notes going forward.
Yeah, two resources I'll highlight. One is Cybery. If you're not using that or don't know of it, it's cybrary.org, I think, or .com. Really great resource. A ton of cybersecurity training material, videos, certification programs. I think 90% of it is free. I know everybody struggles with, you know, training dollars and all that. It's really well done content out there, and you can put together training plans and programs for all different people, especially if you're a smaller hospital and got people that have to do double duty, network admin and security. This is a great way to give them some time maybe to kind of peruse this stuff out on Cybery. So and they'll even give you a branded page of like, hey, with your hospital logo and stuff on it, with content that you want people in your organization to take and complete. And then the second thing, I'll mention this, is, you know, as a company, Sensato, we won't turn anybody away for incident response if you're under attack. We don't, you know, and it's irregardless of ability to pay. If you can pay, they can. If you can't, and you've got challenges, you know, and to Mike Maximo's point, that it at some point this all has to be about doing the right thing. So from our perspective, if you do have an incident and you're not sure where to turn or you need help, you know, obviously there's NJCCIC, but we're also there, and we'll do whatever we can. And you know, we're not going to lead with an invoice. You know, I think it's important we lead with our hearts and figure out what to do and what to do right. So.
Yeah, and for our audience, hopefully you've probably noticed this by now, but one of the things that, at least that I love about our panelists, is everybody just has a passion, and everyone's about, you know, doing the right thing and trying to help each other. It takes a village. So, you know, that's certainly something that all of our panelists have in common, and we truly appreciate, you know, all of your information and insight. I'd also like to, you know, well, I guess we're doing a great job with answering questions, because I don't see any questions coming across just yet. In the meantime, I would like to, you know, maybe give a quick plug to, so back in October, FDA, they released a medical device regional incident response playbook. And while it's, you know, it's focused on incident response, but there is a section on communications, right? So things that you really should be thinking about, you know, information sharing with, you know, both, you know, pre-incident as well as post, right? So if you are impacted, right, what do you do and who do you call and those types of things. So I would recommend if you just kind of Google medical device regional incident response playbook, it'll come up. Unlike the NIST website, which you can't get information while the government shut down, the FDA website is still available. So I don't see any questions. We're coming up on the hour. So I want to thank again all of our panelists, also Jerry Blast for being our co-chair for the Security, Privacy, and Compliance Committee. As a reminder, we mentioned earlier that this session was recorded, and like I said, we have a lot of all of our webinars are recorded and out on the New Jersey HIMSS website under the Security, Privacy, and Compliance Committee. You know, we have a specific page. Also, there's in addition to Mike's, there's a webinar that we have with DHS, which had a lot of great free information or free services that DHS offers to HDO. So definitely highly recommend going out and checking that out. So New Jersey HIMSS, we're always looking for new members, as well as, you know, folks that want to participate on the Security, Privacy, and Compliance Committee. Jerry or Mike, again, are co-chairs on the committee, and just wanted to see if you guys had any last words before we sign off.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, Ronnie, that you did a great job with the questions. That's probably why we don't have any additional questions right now. You probably covered it all, and great answers from the panelists. It's just as great a session as we had in the NJDV hymns in September. Really good. So this should be available by early next week on njhymns.org on the security SPC page, and be there and we'll promote it. Excellent sharing. And I got one comment. Great job done by all, and that came in from Tony Ferrante.
Thanks, Tony.
Okay, so thanks everyone. Great job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks again, everybody. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.